Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Minister of Tourism from our host country of Morocco, Minister Lahcen Haddad.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure that you are here. It's an honor for me that all of you have taken planes and trains in order to be here. Welcome to Morocco. Welcome to Marrakesh. Does anyone here know when Marrakesh was built? Anyone? Over here? When was it built? Which century? Just tell me century. 12th century. That's good. So Marrakesh is one of the millennial cities of Morocco. We have like so many of those millennial cities. Fez dates back to the 9th century. We have Rabat also, which dates back to the 12th century. We have also other places like Volubilis, which is a Roman city that dates back to the 2nd century BC. So this is a millennial culture. This is a very multicultural kind of society where you have Jews, you have Berbers, you have Muslims, you have people of African origin all living together. This is a real melting pot. And it's a melting pot because it has been the meeting point of all kinds of civilization. The trans-Saharan trade, the Mediterranean trade, all kinds of trades that had Morocco as a meeting point. And that's why you have this kind of millennial culture, you have this kind of hospitable culture. Morocco has been ranked 2nd hospitable country in the world by the Davos Economic Forum. And that means like it's an open country, it's a country of many ethnic groups, it's a country also of different kinds of religions. And it's also a country that has so many things to offer. You know, this is the only country where you have like medieval towns probably left intact since the 12th century and 13th century. We have counted something like 56 medieval towns that still maintain the same kind of life that they have maintained for last 600 years or 700 years. So this is a really, the culture here is really embedded in society. But it's not only about culture in Morocco, it's also about the people themselves. The people and their hospitality, the people and their smiles, the people and the languages they talk. And it's also about the wealth of the nature and the ecology in Morocco. We're very, very jealous about like keeping the ecosystem as it is, maintaining our natural resources, but also making them, valuing them so that they have a good impact on society and also on the people. 3,500 kilometers of the sea from the Algerian border all the way to the Mauritanian border. That's Morocco. It's 3,500 kilometers. The sun, almost 12 months from Marrakesh downwards all the way to the Sahara, all the way to the Mauritanian border. But also mountains, one of the richest mountains in the world, rich in terms of their culture, rich in terms of their cultural ecology, rich in terms of the people who live there, the Berbers, the Mazigans, who are the actual, the original people who lived here in Morocco. So it's really an honor for us that you are here. It's a really an honor for us that you come to visit with us, and also it's really an honor that you come here and then you share your ideas in this beautiful forum. This is a nice forum. This is a forum that is sponsored by the German Marshall Fund, but also the OCP Policy Center. And it's a good space for sharing ideas, for talking about really important things that matter to us, that matter to our region, that matter to our spaces. And it's very important that you come in order to talk about ideas related to prosperity. Prosperity is very important. And I think prosperity is not only about like wealth, it's also about sustainable wealth. It's also about wealth and safety. It's about wealth and security. It's about people living together, people working together. It's very important that you are here in order to talk about those ideas and in order to share your values. But what a great place to do that. It's in Marrakesh. So please, when you are here, also go out and enjoy your stay. Go and find out about Jemaa el-Fna, which Mr. Ambassador knows a lot about. Go and find out also about the Medina in Marrakesh, about all the things that Marrakesh could offer. I want to end with one thing, which is very important also in Morocco. Moroccan culture is about sharing, and one way of really sharing that culture is food. So enjoy the food in Morocco. Enjoy it here in this beautiful place, but enjoy it in the plaza. You know that the plaza of Jemaa el-Fna has been going on since 400 years without stop. It's the same kind of entertainment every day, but some of the best food, best street food you'll find at the Plaza of Jemaa el-Fna. It's a nice place. It's also about dialogue, but it's a dialogue, sharing things through cuisine, sharing things through food. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, Dr. Karim Donfried, and Managing Director of the OCP Policy Center, Dr. Karim Aynaoui.
Where shall I stand? Here.
First, Mr. Minister, thank you so much for those great remarks. And for those of us who have experienced Morocco, I can attest to the incredible hospitality and also the incredible food. And hopefully what you'll experience here at Atlantic Dialogues is not only both of those things, but also food for thought. A very warm welcome to everybody in the room. I know many of you traveled great distances to be here, and we just couldn't be more excited to have this group here for Atlantic Dialogues 2015. I'm excited to be back in Marrakesh. We were here last year, and I'm looking forward to an engaging and thought-provoking set of discussions over these coming days. We are honored to be convening here in Morocco under the high patronage of His Majesty King Mohammed VI. I also want to say that this conference would not exist without the vision and leadership of Mustafa Turab, who is chairman of the OCP Group. It is a pleasure to work with him on this 4th edition of Atlantic Dialogues, and we're just delighted about this and our many other joint initiatives. I would also like to thank our partner in this fantastic endeavor, which is the OCP Policy Center, and led by my friend Karim Aynaoui. The Atlantic Dialogues and the joint program of research between the German Marshall Fund of the United States and the OCP Policy Center promotes an updated understanding of the shared interests, challenges, and opportunities facing the Atlantic community, north and south, east and west. We seek to explore the linkages across the Atlantic space, whether language, values, or common experience. This understanding and the cooperation it can foster can be crucial to advancing both prosperity and security, and those objectives have inspired the theme of this conference. In parallel with Atlantic Dialogues, our partnership with the OCP Policy Center incorporates an active research program, including Atlantic Currents, a unique annual review of trends and developments around the wider Atlantic. Many of this year's authors are here with us at Atlantic Dialogues, so I hope you'll pick up a copy of Atlantic Currents and find the opportunity to speak with those authors while you're here. We hope that all of this work will encourage policy audiences to rethink their mental maps about the Atlantic and about transatlantic relations. We believe there is great potential in an Atlantic community that works together to build a better future for all. Harnessing this potential will require learning from each other, and this potential will require learning and understanding our commonalities as well as our differences. As always, this requires open, objective conversation as well as trust. In that spirit, we convene all of you here in Marrakesh. On behalf of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, and I want to say how delighted I am that the chairman of our Board of Trustees, Robin West, is here as well. On behalf of GMF and also on behalf of our friends at the OCP Policy Center, again, a very warm welcome to Atlantic Dialogues 2015. And with that, I want to turn the floor over to Karim.
Thank you. So you're leaving me alone here. President, ministers, excellencies, ambassadors, esteemed guests, friends, this is a pleasure to welcome you here in Marrakesh in my turn. But we've been lying to you. You know why? Because this has started a few days ago, in fact, with our emerging leaders that have been that have gathered together here a few days ago and that they have started to work, actually. So the most important thing, basically, is going on while you guys are sitting here. But I want to acknowledge the presence of all the emerging leaders here in the room. And for us, this is what matters most, I would say, and also for our partners from the GMF, because they have so much energy, in fact. As you know, energy is a declining function of age. Well, that's the way it is. But you need energy to move things, and this project is about moving things. It's about moving mindsets. The most difficult thing to move is mental frameworks, mindsets. And we've been doing this for 4 years together on using various instruments, not surgical tools yet to get into your heads, but slowly and gradually by doing Atlantic Dialogue. And it's important to know that we are very proud that it is the 4th edition. It is a sustained project, and it's going to continue. It has even babies. In Morocco, it's a success to have babies. You know, it's a sort of, you need to have babies in your family, otherwise your mother will kill you. So, so we have babies, and I want to acknowledge some of the friends here. We have, with Jan Leffler also, that has been instrumental. We went to Brazil with the Enrique Cardoso Foundation, where we have what we call an Atlantic Strategy Group. I want to acknowledge also Tidjane Gadio, that will host us in May this year as a smaller version of the Atlantic Dialogue, which is called Atlantic Strategy Group. Fantastic, we'll go together. Jamal Marshall Fund from the US, Cardoso from Brazil, OCP Policy Center from Morocco, and Tidjane's think tank in Dakar. You should applaud that. This is difficult. Thank you. And everybody is here. They're all here, so really reach out to them. We have representative of all these institutions there. If you want to join, you're welcome, because we need your energy. We know that the energy is more with the youngsters. That is why we're investing in youngsters, because they're more ready to take risks. And I want to do a link to the honor we have in this, to have the Atlantic Dialogue under the patronage of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI. This is really because he puts at the heart of what he does the human capital and the youth. And that is exactly what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to achieve a community where everybody understands each other much better. And that is why we're pushing with these emerging leaders, with the youngsters, but with you all. It's really the notion that if we know each other much better, we can solve so many things, and we put our energy in common, we can solve so many things. And this is really at the heart of the partnership we have with GMF and the other partnership we want to build together. Let me finish by saying a few words about OCP Policy Center. It's a very young think tank, as you know, Karim. It has started, let's say, 2 years ago. 4 years ago in the head of our chairman, but let's say 2 years ago in operation terms. And it is really, our motto is really to be a public good, to strengthen policies and dialogue. So a public good is something that is provided to address market failures, to address gaps, to address problems in a public policy notion. So it's really yours. It's to be used by you, both Moroccans and foreigners. I think I see Marcus here. We're doing things together. If it was not the policy center, I would never knew you, Marcus. So thank you for being here, and we'll do much more together. I would also like to acknowledge the support of OCP, the company that supports the OCP Policy Center, but in a very modern way, which is creating the space for us to do things. And it's really the spirit that animates, I would say, the broader OCP ecosystem that has been created. So thank you for being here. Sorry for that something else has been happening much more important than this opening session, but you can catch up. They are here. I had dinner yesterday with Mariam, Sarah, Veronique, Nicolas. They're all here. I see Hiba here. So please do reach out to them. They have an impressive, already a background and very important, energy. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from the BBC, Mr. Alan Kasujja.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, a very quick question to you. How many of you would like to take part in this discussion? Who has a thought about what we should be talking about today? Everybody? Come on, guys. I'm sure you all had lunch and you had something to eat. So here's the thing. This is how we're going to conduct our discussion today. Your Excellency, really good to see you. We have the former president of Nigeria here, Olusegun Obasanjo. Let's give him a round of applause. A lot of important people here today, but the key thing is, I'm easily the dumbest of everybody that's here today. I'll take a back seat. I'd like you to talk to each other. I'd like you to challenge the things that are going to be said, and I'd like you to test them. I'm particularly excited that the young people here to see whether the discussions that are, or the arguments that are being submitted here by these very esteemed people make sense to them. And if they don't make sense to you, please be sure to state that they don't make sense to you. Let me introduce my panel to you. I'm very excited to finally meet Marta Lucía Ramírez, the Rincon. How many of you have heard of her? Let's give her a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. She's an incredible woman. She's a former Minister of Trade in Colombia. She's a former Minister of Defense in Colombia. She has negotiated with the FARC rebels, so she knows a thing or two about what she's talking about. And importantly, last time round, when the elections were held in Colombia, she tried to be president, but it just turned out that she'll be president next time. It didn't happen this time, but it just might happen again next time. And then before that, I'd like to also introduce you to Mr. Mark Brantley. He's got a very unique title, this one. I've never heard of a ministry that combines both foreign affairs and aviation, but he is the Minister of Aviation and Foreign Affairs from St. Kitts and Nevis. Round of applause. He's a lawyer by training, and I've formally invited him to Uganda, where I come from, and he's happily agreed to come. I said, as Minister of Aviation, he has a few planes at his disposal, so that should be good. And then I'd also like to introduce you to Christian Leffler. When I asked him what he did for a living, you know what he said? He said that he's a middle-ranking bureaucrat in the EU. But more than that, you don't get that from the job title. He's European External Action Service Deputy, and he's in charge of economic and global issues. Let's give him a round of applause. And thank you very much, Mr. Minister Lahcen Haddad, for staying around and for those incredible remarks. I'm a keen student of African history, and being in Morocco has always been an exciting opportunity. My second visit to Marrakesh, and believe me, it's really good to be here. So let's get talking. What's prosperity? And I'd like to hear from you what prosperity is. What do you understand it by? And can I just say my biggest rule here, don't talk to me in very big words. Let's have an honest discussion. We're talking about people, okay? We're not talking about all these other complex, seminar type, sorry, NGOs if there are any here, but NGO type discussions, words. Let's have real conversations about real people. We're talking about the prosperity of people. Any thoughts on what prosperity is? Prosperity, anybody? Please put up your hands. And I'm hoping you'll be a much better audience than what I'm seeing right now. Anybody, prosperity? Yes. Shared wealth. So we're talking about issues of inequality. Anybody else? Prosperity. Yes. Bright. Rights and well-being. Anybody else? Human security? Economic growth. But you see, here's the problem with economic growth. It's usually reflected in GDP, in numbers, not necessarily reflected in the quality of life. Isn't that right? Right. And so I'm going to get us started by asking you, Madam, to tell us what you understand as prosperity and what you see prosperity's challenges as being from your point of view, especially speaking as someone from your part of the world, from South America.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Yes, for us in South America, prosperity is a big challenge because we are looking for the well-being, for the better conditions of life for people. I believe that, as many of you have mentioned, it's related with economic growth, but it's much more than economic growth. It means security, it means social conditions, it means inclusion, it means a good environment, it means good opportunities. So the challenge is to improve in all these different topics in societies that has a lot of inequality. We in Latin America has a lot of inequality. We have 12 countries in South America. and we have almost 500 million in the population with a big inequality. Some of the countries has a lot of very extreme poverty, and some of the countries has a lot of problems with crime, narcotics,
And corruption.
guerrilla, corruption, which is...
Tell me about corruption and how it has
Corruption
affected.
is the worst problem that we have in Latin America, and I believe that this is a common problem for many countries in the world. But
let's
my opinion,
understand what corruption is, because that in itself is a problem, isn't it? What is it? How do you define it as being?
I
Is it
believe
just
that
as simply as the theft of public funds? How do you define
corruption
it?
is a problem when the society doesn't have the conditions to improve because some officials use the public funds in their own benefit, but sometimes because people take decisions in the society in the benefit of very small part of the population instead of the common good for everybody. So corruption is not only in politics, it's not only in the public sector, it's also in the private sector. Corruption is a problem when societies are having a very low standards about what is the common goal and how you can achieve a common goal when you take fair decisions from the state institutions, but also in the private sector institutions. So it's something that we have to improve working together, the civil society and also governments, because sometimes civil society has a kind of double standard. Civil society said, oh, politicians are corrupt, governments are corrupt. I don't like democracy because there is a lot of corruption. No, the problem is when societies are having a low standards about the adequate decisions, and when societies are having corrupt attitudes and they are not conscious about this kind of corruption within the civil society.
And I'd like to bring you in now, Mark. Could you just talk to me about the perspective from the Caribbean? She talks about the environment as being part of the process of a more prosperous Atlantic region. It's not just casual conversation for you guys in that part of the world when we talk about the environment. There are certain existential threats, aren't there?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for having me. I think I speak for the smallest independent nation in the Western Hemisphere. We're only a nation of 50,000 people, and so to be at a forum like this is significant for us. I'm also here as a panelist from the Caribbean region, a very special region, and we have to look at prosperity in our context in a particular way. The truth is the Caribbean doesn't have the benefit of many natural resources. We like to say we have sun, sea, and sand, and we have depended a lot on tourism over the years. But the reality is that our chief asset is our people. And what we have sought to do in the Caribbean is to see how we can leverage our intellectual capital to become a player on the world stage and to bring prosperity to our people. Now you speak of the existential threat of climate change. To many, climate change is just nomenclature, it's just language. For us, it's a reality. Many of for those of you who might have visited the Caribbean, and I've heard about Morocco, and it's a beautiful place, but if you have not been to the Caribbean, let me take this opportunity to invite you to the Caribbean, the most beautiful place in the world. And so we would invite you to come, but if you come and if you see us, you would realize, for example, that most of our hotel stock is along the coast. Clearly, people come there for the beaches. And an incremental rise in sea level would have a devastating effect on our main industry, which is tourism. We have to start to think about, just recently, I think maybe about 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, our sister island of Dominica had 6 hours of rainfall from Tropical Storm Erica, and it wiped out their GDP. And so when we talk about prosperity, and we use, for example, the gentleman said about economic growth, and the standard indicator for economic growth, which is gross domestic product or gross national product, as the case may be, as an indicator of how these countries are doing, we ignore the special vulnerabilities of regions like the Caribbean. And the fact that regardless of, for example, my own little country being viewed by the international community as a high-income country, that ignores the fact, and therefore, as a high-income country, not being able to access developmental aid. But that ignores the fact that a single storm can wipe out our country, wipe out our infrastructure.
Just listening to that makes me wonder what your options are. It makes it seem like you are in a very difficult position, to use polite language.
We are in a difficult position, but I feel that forums such as these hopefully will assist in informing the debate. and that the international community will understand that us in the Caribbean, in the context of climate change, we're being asked to cash a check that we didn't write. We've been asked to pay a consequence disproportionately for excesses that have occurred elsewhere. And so when
what would you like to see done?
Well, we would like to see that our developmental agenda, paying regard to our special vulnerabilities, is taken into account. Saying to us as 50,000 people, you're high income and therefore you can't access developmental aid, ignores so many vulnerabilities that we experience. And those measures, we feel, have to be recalibrated in order to give us a fair chance and in order to do what I said earlier, to leverage our intellectual capital and become players on the world stage. I want to make it very clear that in the Caribbean, we're not mendicants. We're not looking for handouts. We're looking for a stage and a framework in which we can participate meaningfully in the affairs of the world. And that basically is my message to this forum today.
You seem to agree. You clapped there for a second.
Because I'm also from the Caribbean.
Yeah, okay, please, let's give her a microphone as quickly as we can. Please introduce yourself if you can, please.
Trinidad and Tobago, an emerging leader, and the minister is quite right in stating that we're not looking for a handout, but as Chronics would say from Jamaica, we're looking for a hand up, and it's really support and capacity building so that we can manage.
Okay, I don't like those words. Support and capacity building.
Why don't you like those?
What do they mean?
It is not that we want aid, or we want to be able to direct and manage our own development. We know what's best for us. We don't want somebody to come in and tell us what's best for us. We understand what's best for us. What we need is the resources and the training, technology to build our capacity so that we can manage our own development.
So in many ways, it's a dignity issue.
Yes. And I think when we deal with any type of groups around the world, we tend to tell them what's good enough for them without asking them how best you can empower them.
Some people argue that the European Union is pretty good at that. I wonder what you have to say. We'll come back to you in a moment. Anybody else that would like to weigh in on what the minister just said, please put up your hand. If you don't, anybody else, yes, please, over there, madam. Let's get a microphone, please.
Hi, I'm Dr. Caroline Alexis Thomas, and I'm also from Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
So the Caribbean, I'm glad to see the first time I came in 2012, I remember saying, what about the Caribbean? So I'm pleased to see in 2015 we have the representation that's going up. But going back to the minister, yes, I agree that you're looking at the Caribbean, we are very vulnerable. 2014 wiped out Grenada with Hurricane Ivan. All right, they're still, they're in the tail end now, but they're still recovering. So we talk about prosperity for the Caribbean. It's not only just dollars and cents. We need to look at how we develop in the Caribbean as best as possible given our resources, but we shouldn't be at the tail end when something is happening in the wider world and they say, oh, the Caribbean. No, we need to be on the table at the same time.
Okay.
So that we can have feel the prosperity like everybody else.
Oh, thank you very much. The ladies from Trinidad and Tobago, round of applause to them. Let me come to you now. Christian, there is this tendency, there's this idea, well, I had this from someone, don't blame it on me, that you Europeans tend to sort of watch out for your own interests and don't really care about what other people think, that there is a certain sort of, there isn't necessarily, that basically is your interests take precedence over everybody else's. And you tend to tell people what to do. Were you talking about?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, fair enough. But what do you think? What's your response to that line of thinking? And also, while discussing it, I'd like to hear what your contribution to this discussion, to these arguments that you've had would be.
Start with your question. I think every administration, every government nationally or administration as the EU, our first and foremost responsibility is to our own people, is to the people we are there to serve. I'm a servant of the European Union, and I have to seek to promote the interests of the European Union for the benefit of European citizens. However, I don't think that the EU is particularly prominent in deciding for other people around the world what they should think. If there's one thing we know in a union of 28 countries, it's that there is no single model. There are at least 28 models. And we have to be humble, and we have to make it possible for each one of those countries, member states, to find their own path within a common framework. That is also the attitude we try to project in our international relations, in listening, in dialoguing, in coming with our ideas. And yes, we sometimes have strong ideas, but we're also willing to listen to strong ideas in order to see how we can build partnerships. Coming to the issues of prosperity, I agree with almost all the different definitions that came here. Growth, economic growth, is an essential component, there's no doubt. But unless that growth turns into shared wealth, unless that growth situates itself in a context of stability and security, security in the broadest sense, including climate security.
I'm really keen to hear about that security thing. What exactly do you mean? You talk about climate, what else?
You can talk about climate security. We heard from my panel colleague about the issues of public security in Latin America, or the security that you have vis-à-vis an administration.
Okay.
In terms of an open government, in terms of an accountable government. There are many different dimensions. Of course, there is also international security and stability, but I leave that out for the moment.
I'd like to again, I hate to do this to you because I really like you, but let's talk about...
People somehow always do this to the representatives of the union.
Let's talk about the issues of security around countries like Libya and Syria and the EU's obligations towards that. A lot of people will be looking at what's going on with the whole migration crisis in Europe, and they'll be wondering whether or not Europe could have done a little bit more, could do a bit more. And this is where many people basically argue that, you know what, you guys just look out for your own interests, and maybe the rest of the world comes second to that.
Well, I mean, we are wondering too whether we could have done more, because when you have literally thousands of people walking across the border every day, you wonder what you could have done to help these people find a better life in the place they were and they cherished, and many of them say they still want to go back to. Now, if anybody out here has a wonderful patent medicine to solve the Syria crisis, please raise your hand now. We've been trying.
Okay, there you are. There's a hand that's gone up.
Yeah, go ahead.
What would you like to say,
There's
sir?
a group of very senior politicians meeting in Vienna trying to figure it out. You go and tell them.
Right. Okay, what would you like to say to that? Could we have a microphone here, please? Anybody else that would like to weigh in on anything that you've had over here?
Patrick Worms from the World Agroforestry Center. First, I'd like to defend the Union. I'm a proud European Union citizen, and we have done something that none of the other continents around this table have done. We are in the process of welcoming over 1 million people who are walking across our border, and we are proud of being able to do that.
Are you talking about Germany?
Yes, it's messy, but we're going to do it.
Are you talking about Germany?
Yeah.
Second point. You are going to have more Libyas, you're going to have more Syrias, and you're going to have them unless you start to deal seriously with the issue of prosperity and climate change. Syria was caused in part because 1.5 million peasants were hit by the worst drought the country had seen for centuries, which meant they had to flee to cities. That its incompetent government was unable to provide them with a minimum of comfort it needed to prevent them from rising in revolt is merely something that happened afterwards. This is going to happen again, ladies and gentlemen. Unless we figure out how to get peasants to become more productive, we are not going to be able to solve this problem.
Thank you very much for your submission. Anybody else? Yes, sir? We need to get the mics over here. Yeah. Anybody else, please put up your hand so that we know where you are if you'd like to contribute.
Hello, I'd like to make Peter Kellner from the United Kingdom. I'd like to make a very brief comment on what I've just heard and then to ask a question. My comment is I personally agree with you. We should welcome people from Syria. The trouble is, people like me and like you, we're in a small minority. My company does polling and market research. We just had our latest results yesterday, and I'll tell you, Angela Merkel's popularity in Germany has fallen off a cliff since the summer. Rather than inspiring her country people to support what she's doing, they don't like it. And in Britain, it's the same. My question, if I may, very briefly, is this, more widely. Christian talked about 28 models across the European Union. In Europe, over centuries of bloodshed and mistakes and corruption, we've finally reached both democracy and stability. My question to the panel is, obviously, in the long run, you want both democracy and stability to achieve prosperity. But in the short run, Which matters more, democracy or stability?
It's Christian.
Right. I don't think we can separate them. I think that they are intrinsically linked. And when I thought about this panel before coming here, I tried to see, well, along which vectors should we reflect on the future of prosperity? And I came up with one word and three vectors. The word was openness. The vectors was open economies. To open up, to reach out. Closed economies rarely prosper in the long run. We've seen many examples of that. The second one, for want of a better term, is open minds. We have to be ready to try new solutions. We have to try to develop ourselves to move away from old patterns and find new patterns in which to pursue a better life for everyone. And the third one is open and accountable government. Unless you get that, and I think there is a growing demand for that around the world from citizens in many, many countries, unless you have that, governments that close themselves from their people or close their countries from the world, again, very rarely succeed. So we cannot separate and say, let's have a bit of a benevolent dictator as long as he runs the economy well. It just doesn't work.
Okay.
It's been tried, it doesn't work.
Mark, you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to respond quickly because this context of openness, open economies. In the Caribbean, what I think that normally translates into is that we then become consumers for major countries that are the producers. And so it ends up being a one-way type of activity. We have been told, for example, in our region that you've graduated, you can't get developmental aid and the like, so you must be more creative. Going back to my point about intellectual capital, you must leverage that. And so, for example, in the Caribbean, we have quite famous jurisdictions such as the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, my own little island of Nevis, and others that have developed a very robust financial services system. The same countries that are saying to us, you must be more open so that our goods and services can flow in, then say to us, maybe you're doing too good.
Why are you listening to
at
them?
these financial services? Well, we're listening to them because those are the power centers. When, for example, financial systems in our region are blacklisted by the United States, by the European Union, by whoever else, this has implications. Our banks suddenly can't get correspondent banking relationships. And so we have to. What we are saying is that we need decision makers in the major epicenters of power to understand that, going back to your earlier point, it's not just about the EU, it's not just about the United States, that when decisions are made, those decisions have a knock-on effect on those of us who are not at the table when the decision is being made, but nevertheless pay the price and bear the consequences of those decisions. And so what I want to see is that certainly when we are told to be more open, that the world is also more open to us when we use the intellectual capacity that we have to create something in effect from nothing. And not thereafter to tell us, well, you know what, we're now going to put restrictions on that activity because we feel that, for example, tax revenue is leaching out of the EU or tax revenue is leaching out of the United States. And so we're going to shut you down, we're going to put restrictions on you. And so in a way, we go back to that imbalance that I think all of us are concerned about.
I'm going to come to you, Minister Haddad, in a minute, but I'd like this lady to weigh in. What would you like to say?
Hi, I'm Estelle Youssoufa. I'm a French journalist. I wanted to come back and a proud French but also EU citizen. I wanted to come back to your statement. Two countries are doing more than Europe. Turkey is welcoming 2.5 million Syrian refugees, Lebanon 1.5 million. So not only do I think that we didn't do enough, but it is obscene to have the discussion about 1 million refugees that we still have not welcomed yet, and having this shameful debate with the populist and the right-wing parties, basically holding the whole continent on ransom politically because we are going through elections. We're in election cycles.
Right. Okay, I'm going to abandon that refugee discussion just so that we don't get sidetracked by it. But then I want you to contribute as well, sir. What would you like to say to this? Please introduce yourself and tell us.
Yeah, my name is Marcus Freitas. I'm from Brazil. And my question is to you, madam. I come from a prosperous country. And it's kind of funny because we sometimes refer to natural resources as a curse. Now, prosperity has a lot to do with the way you manage what you have. Now, my question is this: why Latin American countries haven't been able to build prosperous societies when they're actually sitting on money and resources? Why do we have such poverty in political leadership to manage the resources that we have well, when we compare to other places in the world with much less resources, they do so much better? What's our problem?
Yeah, please, madam.
Thank you for your question, and I think it's related with something that this gentleman has raised. And he mentioned that there are some governments who are who made really bad things. He said, I don't know exactly the term that he used, like a failure government, something like this. The problem is not only in governments. The problem is in the society that sometimes has a kind of decision to leave governments all the decisions. So one factor...
So people need to be more involved.
Yes. One factor that is related with prosperity is governance. So you need to have a good quality of institutions, not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector. In the public sector, you need institutions that provide good services, that provide good justice, that provide good security, but also that promote the economic growth, that promote investment, that promote new entrepreneurs. And that's why it's important to have all these related factors for prosperity. If you have good governance, you have to ask for efficiency in the public institutions, but also transparency. Mm-hmm. And transparency is related with corruption that you asked to me, Alan. So sometimes there are some decisions taken by public officials for policymakers which are not efficient, but sometimes decisions are not transparent because they are focused in a very small part of the population instead of the benefit for all the population. So that's why all these countries with a lot of natural resources has made many different decisions in a very short-term basis, and sometimes the new governments change the decisions. So the civil society is like expecting what governments decide instead of being part of that decisions. And that's why it's important governance. That's why it's important democracy, because you need a civil society which is more mature, who is participating and which is debating with governments and with political parties the decisions that are going to create these short, medium, and long-term nations in all the countries.
Let's
so
give a round
Latin
of
America
applause.
has a lot of richness, but it's a lot of richness that we really not use in the complete way that we can use it.
Let's give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like more of your questions in. I'd like them to come in as well as often. If you would like to say anything, just put up your hand. I'm very likely to see you. But I'd like to come to you, Minister Haddad. The one thing that Marta has actually advanced quite a lot is the need for countries to cooperate in this effort, the need for cooperation, regional cooperation. I wonder how you see it from your standpoint. How can that be achieved in order to sort of achieve this sort of prosperity that we talk about for everybody involved in that effort?
It's very important. Somebody talks about sharing, but I think we can take it to a higher level. I think if people don't reflect in a way that they share the spaces where they belong, countries, for example, like if we talk this part of the world, the Sahara used to be a shared space. So it's a Grand Sahara, and there used to be trans-Saharan kind of trade. There was interaction of ideas, of goods, and all of that. That's a very good space that needs to be reinvented. The Sahel, the same thing. West Africa is the same thing. So this idea of shared space is very important. But it's not only about like reinventing history or reinventing tradition. It's also about like trying to have shared responsibility in order to create prosperity. Let me just tell you an example. The absence of integration, of economic integration in North African countries between Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Mauritania is minus 2% of the GDP of all of those countries. Minus 2% of the GDP is hundreds of thousands of jobs, is less value added. That's a very important concept, like people have that they
What
do
needs to be
integration.
overcome for that regional integration to be achieved?
Well, I think people need also to look that prosperity cannot be achieved by nations by themselves, especially nations in the South. I think the Europeans have understood that a long time ago, and I think they are going in that direction. A lot of people have benefited from the integration in Europe. Look at Portugal and the change that happened, Greece, the same thing, Spain, all of those countries in Eastern Europe. I think in African nations, in South American nations, Caribbean nations, I know them, I think integration and also sharing responsibilities and transforming their own kinds of spaces into spaces of creation of wealth is very important. I just look at the farmers, for example, in West Africa. Farmers in West Africa sell their products in a very, very cheap way. If there were like regional markets, those farmers would not be competing, I mean, like with big companies and intermediaries, they will be able to sell that there. If there were economic integration, a lot of people would be able to, I mean, a lot of universities would be able to connect up, and then there will be training and capacity building for a lot of young people and also for a lot of CBOs in West Africa.
President Obasanjo, I'd like you to come in on this one. I'd like you to weigh in on that, based on what you've heard. Let's give a microphone and a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. President Olusegun Obasanjo.
Well, I do agree with what the minister has said, but one very major issue for us in West Africa that militates against integration is infrastructure. Sure. It's easier for me to get from Lagos to London or to Paris than it is for me to get from Lagos to Bamako. I will have to go outside Africa to Europe before I can go to Bamako. Now, that is debilitating for integration, for trading, and for coming together. The other point that I would like to comment on is what our European friend said. I do agree that, particularly in a democracy, you are voted in and you are accountable to the electorate who voted you in. But then where do we have that vision of larger than my country, larger than my region, larger than even my continent, when we have to talk about issues of climate change, which you cannot handle alone in Europe, nor can we handle it alone in West Africa, or indeed in Africa. And when I listen to my brother from the Caribbean, how many? 5,000 people?
50,000.
50,000 people. And the people and the economy can be wiped off with just one storm. Where is the security? Well, what is the world ready to do and to make them feel more secure and
so what should the world do, Mr. President?
And feel more part of this world?
What should the world do?
What the world should do is to make them feel more part of the world.
How do they do that?
How do they do that? How can the world make sure that what the fear of any disaster can be taken care of? How can they be protected against any natural disaster? How can their finances be stabilized and they can feel that, yes, they can do business with the rest of the world with the openness that you talk about? And if the openness means that you open your door so that I carry away all that you have in your house and I keep what I have in my house, then keep your openness.
Let's give the president a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Anybody else in the audience? Yes, let's give the microphone over there. Let's give the gentleman over there a microphone, please. Yes. Yes, sir, very briefly if you can.
Very briefly.
we start with prosperity, which was the first question you asked, and immigration and everything else. But everything is related. Prosperity is a job with dignity, not just any kind of jobs. And immigration and flow, way before the Syrian crisis, we had the African, the sub-Sahara crisis going to the north. And really, it's the responsibility of the world to help Africa and other poorer countries to invest in their people, in Africans, in becoming independent, financially independent, in every sense of the word, with creating the jobs and helping them come to the 21st century with the rest of the world.
We are in the 21st century. Africans are, aren't they?
We need to bring them up.
A bit more. Bring more Africans into the 21st century. Anybody else? Yes, sir?
No, I just want to go back to the question of the gentleman from the UK about like either democracy or stability. I don't think that's exclusive, and we should talk about like democracy and stability as something, two opposed things. But at the same time, I think we need to reflect about the fact that if people don't have the dividends of democracy, then that would lead to instability. And I think democracy works better when you have a middle class, when you have like wider, wider part of the population, the widest possible, owning the democracy and then working in order to make it work. If you do have democracy only in the laws, and then you don't have people like benefiting from democracy and from the dividends of democracy, of course you will have like instability. But it does not mean that we should not move to democracy. I think we should reinforce democracy. I think prosperity of the middle class, more wealth creation, more security will lead to more democracy.
Christian.
Yeah, just to come back on some of the questions, bringing the Caribbeans in to be part of the global community, well, they are. They are fully part of it, fully recognized and active partners. We've been trying, as European Union, to work with the Caribbean as an important group of partner countries, for example, on climate change. If the EU takes action on climate change, it's because we're worried about the effects that it will have on us as well as others. We're not doing that as some kind of great global altruism. We're doing it because it affects us. We're doing it because we know we can only do it if all of us do it together. The Caribbeans know that better than almost anybody else, and that's why we've worked extremely well together over the years towards what we hope will be a successful outcome in Paris in a little over a month's time. We wish that maybe some other countries, including large countries close to the Caribbean, would take the same proactive
like
attitude.
Which one? Like which one?
That's north and south, all around.
Like which one?
No, I let you guess. I let you guess. I'm not going to point fingers. I'm not going to point fingers. But this is a collective effort. We know that not everybody is going to be ready to step fully up onto the plate in Paris. We will step onto the plate anyway because it is our own future. And if we don't work on that, we're not going to be able to do it ourselves or with others.
Mark, what do you have to say to what he's saying?
Well, I like the language of our future, because I do believe that there's a tendency sometimes to see these things in silos, when in reality, what happens in the Caribbean, what happens in Europe, there's a knock-on effect. And so I'm happy to note the language being used by my friend from the EU. We've looked on, and we go to Paris. I think this dialogue that we're having, this discussion is important, coming at the time when it's coming, because we go to Paris in December, and we hope to leave Paris with some very clear and understanding of what the future holds in terms of climate change. The Caribbean has been front and center in that debate and in that discussion, and I would like to go on record as thanking the EU, because I think they've been good partners in that regard. I would say that some of our neighbors, I would hope...
Who are you guys talking about?
Neighbors. We have neighbors all around. But
Lots
some of them we hope would come with a much more open mind. We're encouraged, for example, in Canada, with the change of government there and the approach that they've enunciated already. We hope to see their advocacy in Paris, which we hope would take us to where we need to go. But I think the world needs to appreciate that whilst I'm here representing a small country, and the Caribbean as a whole comprise small countries, the reality is that climate change is an existential threat for us, perhaps in the immediate term, but ultimately it impacts all of us.
Okay.
And so for me, this ought to be an issue that the world embraces.
Okay, Christian, very briefly before I come to you, Marita.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on another point. Firstly, to clarify, it sounded as if the poor Caribbeans had been abandoned by the rest of the world, notably the EU walking away from them, calling them now middle-income or rich countries. We have actually mobilized €1 billion for the Caribbean for the current programming period of cooperation.
But what does €1 billion? What does €1 billion do when you're about to be wiped out by one storm?
I'm afraid
the storm might come before the €1 billion.
Well, one of the things it does is work with the countries that have been badly affected, Dominica, Grenada, and others, on resilience to see what can in fact be done to mitigate the effects. Okay. That's one very important part. But the other point, since a couple of people mentioned resources and taxation. Now, on taxation, I mean, there are issues, there are global, say, frameworks for fiscal transparency. I think the discussion we've had between the EU and the Caribbean has been to see how can they be most properly applied. And I think it's a tribute to the efforts in the Caribbean that the co-chair of the OECD panel on fiscal transparency comes from Barbados. So it is an issue where we have common interests. If we get that right, I come back to my earlier point, then we build the confidence of the people in open and accountable governments. If open and accountable governments can raise more resources nationally, the study's been done by the OECD, 1% extra taxation around the world would raise tenfold the annual amount of development assistance.
Okay, let's talk about access to markets very briefly. Access to markets. Europe is pretty locked up, isn't it? It's incredibly difficult to sell anything out of this side of the world into Europe. What's the status of that? I don't know if anybody would like to contribute to this. Yes, Madame, over there?
Well,
I'm going to ask her to make a point and then come back. I hope you're making a contribution based on the same point I'm making, are you? Okay, no? No, okay. So let's just tackle this issue of access to markets. Christian, just talk to me about accessibility of Europe as, you know.
Yes, it's a sort of a curiously stubborn myth that the European markets are closed. Actually, if you look at what the EU has done in terms of market opening, including sort of unequal openings where Europe opens more towards its partners than what they need to open in the short or medium terms to Europe, for example, through the economic partnership agreements with the Caribbean, which gives Caribbeans, for all their products, access to the European markets, full access to the European markets. Morocco has an association agreement. There are some exceptions, but broadly, Morocco has full access to the European market. Now, the one thing people have to remember is access to market is not the same thing as a guaranteed sale. Europe is a very competitive market, and if you've got access, you've got to show that your product is good, and people will buy it. If it's not good, they will buy another one.
Yes, Minister Haddad.
Well, it depends on which products we're talking about. So if you go, for example, if you go to farming products, then there are quotas in the European market, and they're very strict quotas with different kinds of products. But of course, they're very competitive when it comes to technological and products. So what is very important for Africa, what is very important for West Africa, is for the farming products to get to Europe. That's very stringent policy. There are like strict kinds of rules about how much you can get there. There are even like problems with it. But of course, Morocco, we negotiate that, and there are like things that happen on the way, but we get it there. But I mean, there are very isolated nations within Africa who cannot get their products onto the European market because of difficult kind of problems that they have.
Geraldine Gardner, thank you very much. Geraldine says cities are often on the front lines of the benefits of prosperity and the impacts of inequality. How can local voices play a stronger role in shaping national or a global, and you scrolled much quicker than I could read that. If you can scroll back, that would be lovely. But thank you very much for that, Geraldine. You can continue to use those handsets of yours. And then prosperity is about peace and satisfaction of a minimum of economic and social human rights, Adil Diani says. And also, the question to you today that I'd like you to answer using those little devices that you have in your hand is, what would you say is the biggest barrier to prosperity? Do that in one word. Do that in one word, and we shall give you the results of that later on. Geraldine's last statement is, how can local voices play a stronger role in shaping a national or global agenda for prosperity? Think about these questions, and if any of you feel like answering them, please come back to them. Let me get some more voices. Yes, madam, you'd like to say something? Could we get a microphone, please?
Hi, my name is Linda. I'm from Canada. I'm one of the emerging leaders, and in my home country, I work in border protection, so the issues of refugees are something that I deal with on a daily basis. I'm on the front line of that, so I'd like to start by commending and applauding my French I'm also a French national. My French my French counterpart on the comment that she made about refugees. The first thing I'd like to say is I don't know if Europe has welcomed refugees would be the correct term. I don't think that Europe has welcomed refugees. I think that Europe was faced with the crisis that it had no choice to deal with. I don't think that Europe embraced those refugees and welcomed them with open arms. I think that, once again, Europe had no choice because of the geographic proximity. I in no way claim to have the solution to what's happening in Syria. I also like what you said about Turkey playing a vital role. Turkey has
And then I make sure you mention prosperity somewhere in that whole statement that you're coming up with. Yeah.
Of course.
Because this refugee thing is a bit complicated. And
but I am making a point.
Yes,
there is a reason why I was saying that. The reason I was saying that is because people start being concerned with what's happening when it reaches their borders. And again, I see that on a daily basis. The crisis in Syria has been happening for almost 5 years now, and it just seems as though Europeans started to be concerned with what's happening when those migrants started reaching the shores of Europe or of Greece or Turkey. What I wish people would understand, and this I'm linking that to prosperity, is that we all have to benefit from achieving stability and security. These are not isolated problems. So Europe has a lot to benefit from solving, whether it be in Syria
or not bombing Libya, some will say.
Or that. And I just wish people would understand that these are not isolated problems that we shouldn't be concerned with because we live in Canada or in Europe. These are problems that we all have to benefit from solving. And I do think that, yes, the European Union has a vital role in playing in that.
Okay, madam over there, the lady over there. Let me get some more female voices first, and then we'll come to the gentleman. Yeah, the lady, yes. I'll come to you in a moment, sir.
I raised my hand for him.
Sorry. Could you,
she raised her hand for me.
Oh, sorry. I do apologize.
No problem. So my point earlier, and to build on Linda's point, I think there are a lot of things that has been said, is that for me, prosperity is, first of all, about, of course, creating value, but it's shared value, it's shared created value. And in order to obtain something shared, we need to collaborate. And the issue...
Collaborate with who? Who needs to collaborate?
Yeah, that's my whole point, is that we are talking about government in the institution. You know, last year I met some people from Fiji and Vanuatu, and they are not afraid of storms. They are afraid that their islands will be wiped out from the map, so it don't exist. They will not be dead, but their countries will disappear from just one night. So the point is, we need to collaborate not as a government or with South, North, but we need to collaborate as a human species. Yesterday we did a very great war game, fun game. It was intense and great, but my conclusion was that human species is probably the least collaborative species in the world, like from all other animals. So we are talking about Syria, we are talking about Caribbeans, we are talking about a lot of things, and saying, okay, maybe I have to give him $1 billion because it may affect me later. How about maybe I need to help someone without having the insurance behind us, but I need to help him or help her because he is or she is a human being.
Are you moralizing this whole discussion?
Yeah, it's moralizing, but it's we need to be pragmatic there. If you want to be really living in a world that really have a global prosperity shared with everyone, it's not really about being, saying the good things and, being like preaching some good thoughts. It's really about being what we should do as a species again.
Okay, thank you very much. A round of applause to him and to everybody else that's made a contribution. I'd like to come back to Marta right now, and then I'll come to you, sir. So bear with me, and I'll come to you as well, madam.
Somebody has mentioned jobs dignity. I think one of the key issues to have prosperity is to create jobs. And you ask why, if we have a lot of natural resources in Latin America, we have no richness. We have a lot of poverty in our countries. And that's the problem, because all these changes in public policies make that we live industrialization process We leave the agricultural sector, so we are in this economy which is based in the prices of natural resources. So when the prices are very high, in the last commodity prices very high for 10 or 15 years, all Latin American countries has a very high GDP growth. But when prices fell down, all the Latin American countries are going to face a very low GDP growth. And that's one of the problems. We need to be more based in the industrialization of our countries, of our economies, agribusinesses, in order to develop also services sectors, because we have these very diversified economies, but we are not using all the potential. 15 years ago, we were very focused in the free trade agreements because everybody thought that it was going to be the solution for poverty. But free trade agreements are good if you have industries, if you have your own agribusinesses, if you have your own services sectors which are competitive, as Christian has mentioned. So that's why it's important to have solid institutions. It's important to have a long-term policies instead of policies that are changing, which every single government. And there is something that we have not mentioned yet, which is populism. Sometimes governments are very populist. And they are offering...
politicians need populism
No,
to be elected.
it's countries, it's citizens also, because people is asking that everything, people wants to have everything for free. And some governments where prices of commodities are very high, they offer everything for free. So they offer housing for free, they offer food for free, they offer a lot of a lot of programs for children, for all people, everything for free. This is not sustainable. What you have to do in an economy is to create jobs, to have a good quality of jobs, to have a good dignity jobs, which is a long-term vision for prosperity. It needs a good economy, good institutions, good governance, at the end of the day, good democracy. And good democracy needs and means a lot of civil society participation, good quality of civil society participation, a good quality of people in the private sector demanding good services, but also having the good response to their own obligations, to pay good salaries, to have good conditions for their workers. So this is an integral responsibility for different sectors.
Thank you very much, Madam. Let's give a round of applause. Let's come to you, Minister Haddad. What are you going to say?
I just want to go back to the fact that there will be many more Syrians in the future if we don't watch out. I think that's true. But I think there are three things that happened and then led to the Syria that we have and also the other countries that are facing problems. Climate change is a big problem. We need to have a collective response, a universal response. There is an opportunity in Paris. There will be an
that discussion has
in
been
Morocco.
ongoing for such a long time, and you have to wonder why it continues.
Well,
What is the problem? What needs to be done in order to sort it out once and for all?
I think we have to say that there is a huge problem, and then that problem needs to be fixed, and we need that to weigh in relation to economic interests. That's all. I think there are big economic interests that big countries which are producing a lot of the emission gas that changes the climate change. We need to take the real measures. They are very, very, very important measures, but the big nations need to take that. I think that's one thing. Number two is the fact that all of these nations, African nations, Arab nations, have a huge population that is young without any prospects. That's also happened in Syria, it's happened in other countries. And I think the third thing is good governance. Bad governance. When you have these three, you have a recipe for disaster.
Bad governance is subjective.
Sorry?
Isn't it subjective?
Well, yeah, bad governance, when you don't have issues, when people cannot talk, when there is no dialogue, when there is no democracy, there are no voices. That question about the voices, local voices, is very important. Syria did not have any civil society to start with, so people cannot voice their anger anywhere. So that's also, like, that's bad governance.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause. Let's come to you. Let's come back to some of these amazing questions and comments. Patrick Wams, prosperity needs stability, rule of law, science, and taxation. States that are financed by their citizens rather than by donors are more likely to be responsive to citizens. And then João Ribeiro says, are development and prosperity the winning fight effects against exclusion? What does that mean? Are development and prosperity the winning fight effects against exclusion. Where are you, sir? Yeah, would you like to explain that a bit, please? Yeah. Let's give him a microphone.
Wait, well,
first of all, what do you do, sir?
I'm Director General for Maritime Policy in Portugal.
Okay.
Also involved in cooperation projects supporting EU. And in my perspective, exclusion is the major root cause of all the problems, because inclusiveness, if you are excluded, you're not integrated anymore. So you have to make sure you integrate. And if you integrate, you cannot allow to have someone excluded. And exclusion also promotes poverty. And if you want to fight against poverty, then you have to make sure you integrate and you don't leave anyone behind or aside. So all the efforts we can make promoting prosperity, from the base, you need to make sure that you fight against exclusion. And the effects are really the ones that are an end result of the end state you would like to achieve.
Okay, thank
so
you
you
very
have
much.
to fight the exclusion.
Okay, what about you, sir? You put up your hand. Could you just very briefly, I've got a few more hands coming up. Yes, sir?
My name is Rezrazi El Mustafa, Moroccan based in Japan. So just I have two questions. The first one, His Excellency, the Minister talked about space management, but space sharing. But I guess the time sharing also is an issue, because when it comes to a very affected community and they don't have the time to wait for tomorrow or after tomorrow, to wait for long-term strategy buildings. On the other side, you have the experts, the strategists, the politicians who are taking their time and they don't care about the present time for the affected community. It makes one of the most conflictual situations actually to talk about prosperity.
Okay.
Second
Briefly,
thing
very
is
briefly.
prosperity is a psychological state. It's not only physical.
How does that work?
So, for instance, if, based on the human security literature in Japan, they are talking about prosperity is when you are sleeping and when you wake up, you are not afraid from tomorrow. When you are afraid from tomorrow, you cannot talk about prosperity. People are affected. And this is our situation for the grassroots community in most of African countries.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very interesting. What about you, sir? Are there any ladies? I'll come to you in a moment. Very briefly, please.
Thank you very much. Andris Alaoui from Morocco. I just saw the anonymous, yes. Pourquoi accepter la circulation des biens et des services?
Yeah, I hesitated to read that because I couldn't.
Yeah, I know that it was passed very quickly because maybe it was written in French. Let it be on, please.
What does it mean?
It means that why should there be a free movement for goods and services, but not for people? What about migrations? And that's my point. I was, listening to all of you and appreciating all what you said, which was very interesting indeed. I noticed that talking about open economies, open societies, democracy, human rights, all these beautiful things in the paper, and not talking about the free and complete freedom of movement of people. How could you do that?
Thank you
I
very
believe
much.
that is an issue which is not addressed enough, and I wanted to point out that.
Thank you very much, sir. Very good point. It's amazing how many countries deny me a visa because I'm a Ugandan. It's quite interesting. I'll tell you a story. I was going to an Arab country that shall remain unnamed to moderate one of these sorts of things, and I live in London. So when I got to when I applied for my visa, they said, you know what, you're a Ugandan. We need to see that you don't have Ebola. So could you give us an Ebola test? I said, well, I've not been in Africa for the last 6 months. I've actually not been to West Africa. I don't know, I can only tell you where Guinea and Sierra Leone are. They said, but you see, you have a Ugandan passport. So those are some of the challenges you face. Madam, you're going to say something, yes? Could you get a microphone?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrea Richter, and I work for the Bureau of Energy Resources at the State Department. So I wanted to bring the discussion back to climate change and energy. So obviously, access to reliable, affordable, sustainable energy, I think, is a key driver for prosperity. And we've heard, I think, every single panelist talk about the need for ambitious goals at COP21. But I think the next piece that the minister was discussing is implementation is going to be key. Goals are great, but if you can't actually transition, then it means nothing. And there's entrenched interests of fossil fuels that are price volatile, and there's going to be a huge amount of investment that's needed to build the infrastructure in order to realize this. So how do you, as policymakers, in a very tangible way, make this transition happen that's both economically viable but also sustainable?
Okay, thank you very much. Let's just pass the microphone to the gentleman there. Yeah, what's your name, sir, and what was your comment?
Hello, I'm Landry Signé from Cameroon, and I'm Emerging Leader 2013. I'm also a distinguished fellow at Stanford. 2 or 3 comments related to prosperity.
Keep it at 1 if possible, yeah.
Asomuglu and Robinson will consider, who wrote Why Nations Fail, will consider that prosperity is linked to inclusive political and economic institutions versus extractive institutions. And an illustration they provide is North Korea and South Korea. So inclusive political inclusive institutions means that citizens are free to innovate and to contribute to the economic development without being scared of having the government seizing their wealth. Now, Francis Fukuyama from Stanford also considered that state capacity is much more important than the nature of the political regime in explaining wealth of nations. For example, why China has grown so quickly compared to the United States. And finally, to use my own research, I conducted a systematic comparison of 47 sub-Saharan African countries, comparing economic performance with democratic or accountable government. So one thing, you have a higher number of accountable governments which are much more prosperous, but when countries, especially new democracies, are not performing well, economically speaking, they are likely to reverse, as said by the minister, to authoritarian roles.
Okay, let's keep it there. Thank you very much. Madam at the very back, we have about 10 minutes, so we need to sort of fit in everybody or everything. The lady at the back, yes, please. Yeah, I can see your hands, guys. I'm coming to you. You're going to keep it really short, aren't you? Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause for keeping it short. Okay.
Hi, so my name is Yves Fofana. I'm from Côte d'Ivoire. I work for GE, and I'm a part of the Emerging Leader program. I'm actually, this is just a comment. We heard a lot of things which made sense. They're very practical, but I think that we're forgetting that prosperity, for me at least, has a key element, which is hope. I really do think that when people are hopeful, when we apply the positive thinking, that naturally people would actually go and do what's best for them and also what's best for others.
Okay.
So that was just my quick comment.
Very good. Thank you very much. What about you, sir? What do you want to say?
Good afternoon. My name is Dapo Oyewole. I'm from Nigeria. I run the Policy Development Network, and I'm a Yale World Fellow. Listening to very, very rich discussions, if I were to sum it up, what I would say I can hear people saying is that there can be no shared prosperity without collective security, and there can be no collective security without shared prosperity. The challenge I'm hearing from everybody, and I could be wrong, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the politicians, policymakers, and institutions of global policy have not really been able to embrace this reality or even begin to transform to address it. So my question to the distinguished panel would be that how do you ensure that the institutions you lead, the governments you lead, or the countries you lead can actually reflect this reality of the fact that no shared prosperity, without shared prosperity, we can't have collective security and vice versa?
Mr. Haddad, Honorable Haddad, that's your question. Just think about it for a second. I'll come back to you for an answer. And what about you over there, sir? Yes, you. Very briefly.
Yes, my name is Usman, a Nigerian living in Germany. I think the real difference and the real gap is two things. One, Africa and other countries who are developing, we don't need development aid. What we need block European Bank from collecting our money. If a tomato from Senegal cannot go to Belgium or Germany, but all the Senegalese who want to lodge their money can go and keep it in Swiss, can go and keep it in German banks. Why the money is easy to go, but the development, you only send us a development aid, and even the development aids that is coming to Africa or other countries are not being done by the African, but only maybe 30% is being used in this country.
Okay.
Then thirdly, if you talk about democracy and good governance, you have to say it and with action. Presently now, hardly you find a head of state who is going to come to power through coup d'etat, but the coup d'etat now is changing constitution. And this constitution are being changed and the president are being welcomed. The civil society in these countries try their best to protest, to show that we want democracy, but they are being oppressed, and the president, the next day, he get red carpet in your country.
Thank you very much. Let's leave it there. We'll be running out of time.
But one point, please, one point about refugees, please.
Yeah.
We talk about refugees. Yes, Syrian refugees are the topic now, but the topic of Yemen, who are being bombed by day by day, nobody talk about it. And this Syrian is conflict between people and the government, and we call terrorists, but in Yemen is a government bombing people. The people are dying and they have to leave the country.
Okay, thank you very much.
And this government get red carpet everywhere they go.
Okay,
so
thank you. Thank you.
If we want to stop refugees, we have to stop wars. And how do we stop it is...
Okay, I said thank you very much. I meant that's the point where you end your submission. I need to move on because, again, I understand that there are all these other issues, but we do need to lock in on prosperity in this particular region. And I'll come back to you, gentlemen and ladies, to conclude in a moment. You put up your hand. Please, what's your submission?
Thank you. I'm Alfredo Valadao from Sciences Po in Paris, and probably I'm an old, cynical geopolitician. So I'll ask a question to the panel. In my view, there is no prosperity, governance, economic growth, etc., without basic security for people. And there's no law without policemen. And in many states, don't have the capabilities or the organizations to do something about it. So my question is very simple. It's true that in the long run, prosperity and democracy will solve security problems. But in the meanwhile, who should take the responsibility of building capabilities, of taking the decisions, of using legitimate use, to have the legitimate use of force in the world today?
All right. Thank you very much. A round of applause. One last one before we come back to the panel for conclusion. You'll come back and answer that in a moment. Very briefly, that's the last one from...
I just want to say two things that are not politically correct. First, we need good governance, but we also need leaders. Someone said Angela Merkel's popularity has fallen a cliff. I disagree. I think her prestige has risen tremendously because she has been a leader facing public opinion and dropping a line in history. Second, as to migration, of course, it's important to be open-minded, but someone said, well, could you treat persons like goods? We have to face the fact that migrations are not always in the interest of origin countries. So it's a coin with two sides.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's come back to you. I'll start with you, Mr. Minister. I gave you a task to answer that very important question.
I'm going to deal with three questions, if you don't mind. The first one is about sharing prosperity. We agreed that there are no handouts, but I think if the question is to my government, to Moroccan government, for us, the most important thing, especially with Africa, is investment. We are the first investor in West Africa, or the second investor in Africa. We are doing a lot in that regard. But I think there are challenges. The challenges is the investment is moving only from Morocco towards West Africa. It's not moving towards Morocco. number one. Number two, it's mostly the big companies who are trying to move into small and medium businesses to to small kind of initiatives. So that's important. The second one is about security, the question about security. I agree that security should be done by someone. The state has a responsibility, but I don't think it's enough. I think security is also a matter of citizens. It's also a matter of society itself. Most of the societies that are really peaceful and secure, it's also because people and the citizens are mobilized and have a stake in the security and defend it. That's important. With the energy question from the lady who is in the State Department, I think that's a very important question. And for us in Morocco, we are moving towards having solar energy and renewables probably 20 to 30% of the whole energy issue. But I mean, there is a very big challenge now. It's like research and development has not really moved far in the renewable energy to make it worthwhile governments and to make it worth. It costs more now to invest in renewable energy than in the fuel energy. And with the prices of the oil going down, now it's becoming like a really difficult thing. So yes, renewables are good. I think for a lot of the African nations, we need to move into renewables, but we need the research and development to make that really worthwhile and also not, cost less than the fuel energy.
Mr. Minister Haddad, let's give him a round of applause. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also wanted to jump in on the renewable energy question as well. I was in Germany recently and noticed that globally, Germany does incredibly well with solar energy. And I thought, my goodness, the Caribbean has more sun than Germany does. But in the Caribbean, we don't do as well in terms of solar energy. So it really does require a rethinking of what we do and how we do it. Specifically to the representative here from the State Department, I would want to publicly thank the State Department because they've been working very closely with St. Kitts and Nevis. We have geothermal energy, or the promise of geothermal energy in Nevis. And the efforts so far suggest that by 2018, that little island will be entirely fossil fuel free for the generation of electricity. If that promise is fulfilled, it will mean that we will become the greenest place on planet Earth, something that I would like to come back in a few years and say we have achieved. But I feel that we could not have done it without the assistance of the State Department, which for us is important. But we are now moving very aggressively throughout the region with geothermal energy. We are moving aggressively with solar energy. We're moving aggressively wind energy and waste to energy as well, where we're seeking to implement those. If I can end, because I know that time is running, it seems to me that this discussion in the main, for me, what I've taken away from it is that prosperity is not just about wealth. Ultimately, it's about well-being. It's about the human condition, and it's about human well-being. And I feel that if I can go away with that, and if some of us can go away with that, that it will make us a better world. And when we take decisions, particularly in the epicenters of power, we consider the implications of those decisions. So the well-being of humankind, that is what we ought to be seeking to achieve.
Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Christian, I wonder if you're taking anything away from this discussion. What is it? What's the one thing you're taking away, again, going by what he said?
Let me pick up on a few of the points made, and a few that you made too. You said at one stage on climate change, you said, well, this has been with us for so long, so why haven't we done it already, and what are we supposed to do? I think it's dead easy. It's a no-brainer. Go to Paris, make your pledge, make it credible. That's it. We all know what needs to be done. It's been talked about for 10 years, for 12 years. We know all the parameters. All the countries around the world know them. And we're waiting for them in 5 weeks in Paris. If they really take this seriously, if they want to take their responsibility, that's where they show it. I would believe that we've tried from the European Union side to prepare ourselves for that.
Are you optimistic about Paris?
I remain stubbornly optimistic. I remain stubbornly optimistic. We will not get as far as we would have liked, but I hope we will get far enough. Now, on the prosperity, shared prosperity, and the link to migration, no, this is not something that has been discovered in the last few weeks or months or even the last year. We've been trying to work on the fundamental issues of generating prosperity, inclusiveness, and perspectives. I think that point was made, which is hugely important. Allowing people to take their lives forward where they are, or if they don't want to stay where they are, to go somewhere else in an orderly fashion. All of that, and I think the best example that we've actually come to a realization about this globally, collectively, came 5 weeks ago, the other way, at the UN General Assembly, or just before the General Assembly in New York, for the so-called post-2015 development goals, the now sustainable development goals in the Agenda 2030. That agenda does link all the different aspects we've talked about, not just growth, health, education, but environment, good governance, stability, security. All the elements are there. And we've all signed up to them too as a collective responsibility for the period ahead.
Okay.
Now, if you would allow me, just
about 23 seconds, yes.
Exactly. I will do it in 53 seconds, just on a light touch. Since we came here, and there are a few, like the good realpolitik cynic from Paris, who is as old as I am. When we came to Marrakesh, it made me think of Woodstock. Those of you who remember Woodstock, raise your hands. And Crosby, Stills and Nash, who had a hugely popular song called the Marrakesh Express.
Would you like to sing it?
That is, I can't sing, so I don't want to send you. But there are two things to take away from that. One is the refrain from that song, which I think we should all sign up to, which was all on board the train. We're all on board the train. The one thing we have to fight against is the album where that song was called Helplessly Hoping. Now, we have to show that we've moved beyond that, but we're still on the train.
Let's give Christian a round of applause. There's a lady here called Rolake. Is Rolake here? Is she here? Where? Yeah, Rolake, what's your point? You said something. You wrote something over there. I'm concluding this, believe me or not.
My point earlier was about leadership and political will, and particularly in reference to the context in which I come from. I'm from Nigeria, and I know in countries with weak institutions, leadership and political will are especially important in driving those decisions and seeing the implementation that we so desire. And I think that's probably a part of the debate that we haven't really focused on. And I think with those countries which are still young democracies, many countries on the continent, we are barely 50 years old in terms of being nation states. I think the ability of leadership, particularly in the absence of strong and consolidated institutions, to drive a lot of the debate around prosperity is absolutely critical, and particularly in challenging and fighting the vested interests that may work against that shared prosperity.
Thank you very much. What's happened to all these messages that were up here? I think they've disappeared. So I'm going to ask Marta, Lucía, Ramírez to sort of make her concluding remarks as well. And also, I'd like you to talk about inequality, because inequality is a big problem as far as prosperity is concerned. How do you overcome inequality? There isn't a country in the world, even the US, that talks about all these things, all these great things. It's only just 1% that is doing well. So this inequality question is one that requires serious
I believe that to resolve inequality problems, you have to provide equal opportunities to everybody, equal opportunities, and of course, equal rights. No exclusion in rights, no exclusion in opportunities of education, jobs creation. And the opportunities are also related with the security that somebody has mentioned. Everybody has to have the opportunity to have life, to have freedom. Security is one of the main responsibilities of a state, but not only the personal security is this multidimensional concept of security, food security, legal security, personal security, and of course the economic security. Economic security is very important because that provides dignity for a person. If you give economic security to citizens, they are going to have dignity, and dignity means prosperity. So everything is related, and of course, all this depends if you have good institutions in the public sector, but also a good institutions in the civil society. A good government must develop strong civil institutions. Good governments must be focused in improve the quality of political parties, the quality of associations, union associations, and this kind of civil institutions that makes possible to have citizens more informed and more and more participants in the development of a long-term agenda for nations and for the human being.
Thank you very much. Are you going to stand again?
No.
You're not standing again?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, but before you go, I'd also like someone, does anybody have any thoughts at all about the role of women in prosperity? I know we've run out of time, but is there a point to be made about that? Anybody?
I really believe that
Yes,
we need
there's a lady,
to improve
there's a lady
women
of,
participation.
Yes, let's give a mic really briefly. I've run out of time, and there's, by the way, some tea waiting for you after this.
Thank you. Maybe I have the time for my own conclusion of this session,
Yeah.
which is that prosperity to me is like migration. It's about political courage. That means going beyond the 3 or the 4 year or the 5 year mandate, testing new things, and taking opportunities. And I'm very glad that you mentioned the issue of equal opportunities. I would say giving opportunities, finding opportunities, and having human mobility in a territory means opportunities as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The role of women, we have to conclude this. Role of women, yes, madam, very briefly. Let's give her a microphone. I'll pass it to her. It's all right. Okay. Very briefly, please.
40,000 women die each year in Nigeria giving birth to babies. And it means that those children are born without anyone to raise them, to nurture them. And it's not a surprise, really, that northeast Nigeria, where we have Boko Haram, has the highest incidence of maternal mortality, the lowest incidence of education of the girl child. So I think, if we're talking about prosperity, we need to invest in women. We need to invest in girls. We have to empower them to do what they want to do, which is to nurture the future. But if we do not do that, then that's the beginning of exclusion for those children, and they'll grow up angry, they'll grow up without any knowledge of how to respond, what to do, and they will probably cause the problems that we're seeing in Nigeria, we're seeing in Libya, we're seeing all around the world. So we need to be fair to women. Women stand with men every day. And at some point, men need to get it together and stand with women as well. And they have to push women forward and put women first. We keep putting them first, and it's almost a thankless job. There needs to be reciprocity if we're going to have shared prosperity.
I think my job is done now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, madam. I think that's a very powerful submission.
Yes.
And I think we need to pay attention to it. I've had an amazing time this afternoon. I've got to say thank you very much to my panelists, starting, of course, very importantly with Marta Lucía Ramírez de Rincón, who is, like I said, a former Minister of Trade, former Minister of Defense, and she negotiated with rebels, and she says she won't try again to be president, but
not in a short term.
And she's from Colombia. Let's give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Never say never.
We've also had on this esteemed panel Christian Leffler, who is with the European Union and who's taken a lot of hate and remains standing. Thank you very much, Christian, for being a sport. And we've also had on this panel Mark Brantley, who is from St. Kitts and Nevis, passionately arguing for the Caribbean, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Aviation. How many planes do you have? How many?
None.
Okay. So what do you do then?
I regulate those that come from elsewhere.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I thought you had a few planes parked in your yard, but clearly not. Okay, and finally, let's say thank you very much to Lahcen Haddad, who is Minister of Tourism in Morocco, for his contribution. My name is Kasujja. Thank you very much for being a very brilliant audience.